Welcome to the ILEARN Accommodations training for test administrators. This training is intended to support test administrators in management of testing accommodations and to minimize the use of inappropriate test settings during test administration. For successful management of accommodations, test administrators must be familiar with the students they serve for the test administration. Before we can successfully provide student accommodations, we must understand what accommodations are. An accommodation is a change in the testing materials or procedures that enables students to participate in a way that measures abilities. An accommodation cannot change the construct that is being measured. Remember, a construct is that knowledge or skill related to the academic standard which we are measuring. It is important to evaluate each accommodation to ensure the validity of the construct. Accommodations are provided along with universal features and designated features so that all students are offered a more equitable opportunity to show what they know and can do. As you will see throughout this training, different tools, features, and supports are offered for many student groups to support individual student needs. Accommodations can only be provided to students who have special plans. Providing an accommodation to a student who does not have that accommodation listed in his or her plan almost always results in a test invalidation. The special plans that provide accommodations for students are Individual Education Plans, IEPs, Section 504 plans, Individual Language Plans, ILPs, Choice Special Education Plans, CSEPs, or Service Plans, SPs. Public districts providing services to special education students attending accredited non-public schools. The IDOE released the 2019-2020 Accessibility and Accommodations Guidance to provide direction regarding what accessibility features and accommodations can be provided to different populations of students. This guidance is a component of the 2019-2020 Indiana Assessment Policy Manual. Please reference this document at the link provided to fully understand the supports that can be provided for students. It is expected that test administrators are thoroughly familiar with accommodations and guidance prior to administering an assessment. Universal features are supports available to all students. Embedded items are available on the online platform. Non-embedded features can be provided to any student who would benefit from these supports during testing. Supports should mimic typical classroom practices as much as possible. Decisions on non-embedded features must reflect those supports that the student uses when available during instruction and for assessments. Another important note is that universal embedded features are not available for students who take the assessment on paper, specifically the glossary and spell check tools, but will have these supports as non-embedded tools where appropriate. Designated features are available to any student where a need has been determined. These supports do not require a special plan of any kind. An accommodation is a change in the standardized testing materials or procedures that enables students with disabilities, English learners, or English learners with disabilities to participate in an assessment in a way that measures abilities. An accommodation does not change the construct being measured, but may only be provided to students with an IEP, 504 plan, CSEP, or SP that indicates the need for that accommodation. You should prepare to correctly provide student accommodations during testing. First, obtain a list of your students' accommodations. You can usually get this from your special education director, your testing coordinator, or the student's special education teacher of record. Second, check to make sure those accommodations are correctly displayed and tied. Your testing coordinator may do this for you, but it is ultimately the test administrator's responsibility to ensure correct accommodations are provided at the time of testing. If you find that a student's test settings are incorrect, contact your testing coordinator for assistance. Do not allow the student to test until accommodations are correctly assigned. If students test with incorrect accommodations, test scores may be invalidated. Non-embedded accommodations are not provided to students by the testing platform. They must be provided by the test administrator. Before providing non-embedded accommodations, review all applicable guidelines in the Accessibility and Accommodations Guidance document and in the Test Administrator's Manual. You want to be familiar with what types of supports are allowed and what are not allowed. Then gather needed materials. For example, be sure assistive technology is available, special seating is arranged, or other supports are on hand and ready for use. Provide the accommodations at the time of testing. Remember, accommodations are intended to mirror what the student is doing in the classroom, so students should not be interacting with accommodations for the first time on a high-stakes assessment. Finally, be sure to document your provision of the required accommodations. For online test sessions that allow calculator use, students in grades 6 through 8 for math and grade 6 for science may use the online Desmos calculator or an adaptive handheld calculator that meets the criteria published in the calculator policy. A screenshot of the Desmos calculator is provided on the screen. An adaptive handheld calculator is allowed for ILEARN biology and 6th grade science. Please note that TAs must oversee the use of the handheld calculator to ensure use only during appropriate test segments. Misuse of a calculator may result in a test invalidation for an assessment needed by a student to fulfill graduation requirements. The text-to-speech and human reader accommodation meets the same student need in different testing modes. Text-to-speech is provided with online assessments, and human reader is provided with paper. The human reader accommodation requires individualized testing. Remember that an accommodation is a change in the standardized testing materials or procedures that allow students with a disability to participate in the assessments while still measuring the intended construct. Because of this, only portions of the assessment are read aloud to students. The assessment must also be read aloud in a standardized fashion. For these reasons, TAs must not stray from the read-aloud script when providing this accommodation. Test administrators must scribe or transcribe student responses when providing the Braille, scribe, or computer-generated response accommodations. Be sure to follow all instructions in Section 6 of the Accommodation Guidance when scribing or transcribing student responses. If you have any questions about accommodations, be sure to talk to your test coordinator prior to testing. You can also contact the Indiana Department of Education Accessibility Specialist, Karen Davies, at the email and phone number listed on the screen. This concludes our training. Thank you for your attention.